And so because of that, that leads to some myths that are very common among especially leftists and socialists and all, especially in the US, some myths about how capitalism works. And so there's a great essay, Seven Left Myths About Capitalism by Blair Taylor, that talks about these misconceptions that come up so much whenever you read articles online from many different sources, from progressives and leftist type people, use that term. They will make a lot of these statements that actually end up being myths about the system. And my summary of them would be that they tend to focus on individuals as opposed to looking at the big, broad systemic picture. So, for example, here, a very common thing is to say it's greed, right? If we could get greed out of the process, that would fix everything. Not really, because capitalism has this kind of grow or die imperative where, because of the way markets work and things like that, businesses naturally have to compete with each other, and they have to do more and more and more, or otherwise they get hostily taken over or defeated by other businesses. And it gets out of the hands of an individual anymore. It gets out of the hands of the CEO. It becomes an imperative to survive under capitalism that you have to always have more and more and more. It's not individual greed at this point, or at least not broadly. Not saying the greed doesn't exist, obviously, but saying that the system as a whole is not caused by greed by itself. It's a systemic problem. And this also applies to corruption. Yes, corruption exists, but that's not the primary problem with politicians. And this kind of gets at the heart of why supporting, say, for example, someone to run as a Democrat, a progressive to run as a Democrat, isn't going to change the system very deeply, because it's not a matter of corruption and picking a new person and then, hey, once we have a new person in office, it fixes it. No, that doesn't change the systemic structure of capitalism around that office. That puts immense pressure on you once you're in office to uphold the system, to either uphold the system or you get kicked out very quickly, right? It turns against you. And similar happens with Wall Street. Some people focus on financial monetary things. But again, that's the root cause there is exploitation of labor. It's not really about the monetary system, again, as a primary thing. Some people will look at big corporations and they'll say break them up, right? They'll say break them up, make smaller things. Small corporations are still capitalist, though, and they still have that same drive to exploit workers and to grow or die, right? To continue growing, to take over competitors and do all that stuff. So even by focusing on small business instead of big, you're not fixing it, And unfortunately, what happens is folks will also turn to conspiracy, where they'll think, there's some small group in the back. You hear things like deep state, right? There's some small group that's making decisions and causing all this. And again, it's a systemic wide problem. It's not individuals or some small group of people on the whole that are making capitalism this way. It's a systemic, societal, cultural wide thing that we have to talk about. And we all have to work together toward changing. And we have to be careful how we talk about it. That if we just talk about, for example, take America back, build back better, right? Make America great again. These things are kind of hiding the systemic nature in the history of capitalism in this country. That's especially intertwined with, racism and colonialism and all these things. So I think the big picture here is just that there is a big picture that when we talk about capitalism, it's systemic, and it's not just replacing any particular individual that's going to be enough to change it. It has to be a systemic change, which means a change in how the institutions themselves work. And primarily that means shifting things toward democracy, toward including more workers and communities in decision making, instead of having it allocated to capitalist investors and a small group of elected officials and things like that propagate this. So
yeah, and I think too, the essay is called Seven Left Myths About Capitalism, but these apply to the center, the Democratic center and center right too. It's a common thing that you see qualifiers added to capitalism to try to save it. right? This is crony capitalism. This is corporate capitalism.
Exactly.
These are no. This is capitalism, and this is exactly as it is designed, right? This is how the system is supposed to work. And I think too, there's an when it comes to this, and I'm really glad that Garrett brought this into the brought into the conversation the idea of a systemic versus individuals, because that was what I was mainly going to jump in with. And there are psychological reasons why we do this stuff, right? If there's a person that's the problem, there's a tangible thing that can be done. They can be voted out of office, right? But if it's systemic, the solutions are so much bigger. The situation is so much more precarious, right? And so it's just easier. It's just easier. It's why I think we see so many liberals have a crisis of confidence and become libertarians, right? Because they see the problems with capitalism. And then they find the first ideology that gives them specific things that they can attack, in this case, elected officials in government, right? And so it's really important that we understand that while there are very real and very horrible people, that are responsible for the state of the world that we live in today, it's systemic, right? They are merely pawns in the system, and they may be very, very powerful pawns. They may have benefited a lot, but you get rid of Elon Musk, you get rid of Jeff Bezos, there's another one in the wings. There's somebody else that's going to rise up. There's somebody else that's going to fill that role. So, I think, understanding these myths is good, but really understanding that underlying thing of, this isn't about individual actors. This is about systems of oppression. And when it's really important, projecting out till next month for organizing, that when we organize, we understand that basic fact, or else we're organizing with the wrong targets. We're organizing in the wrong direction. So, over.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, you've got it exactly right. And that kind of mention about it seems like such an enormous goal to change the systemic thing, and so it kind of shakes the faith of some people, and they might run to libertarianism or something that might seem easier, or an easier way to handle such a big problem.